warrant of arrest at sinabi ng pulis na pwede ka bang imbitahan sa presinto, wala kang magagawa kundi sumama dahil tinutupad lamang nila ang utos ng hurado para kunin ang kustodiya mo. Kung ikaw din ay nahuli sa akto na gumagawa ng krimen or ikaw ay caught in the act at ikaw ay inimbitahan sa presinto, yun ay maaaring disguise para sa isang validong warrantless arrest.
Tuloy ang bangon, tuloy ang hilom. Kayang-kaya basta sama-sama. Kasama ang tamang balita at tamang serbisyo ng DZRH sa isang makabagong bayanihan.
DZRH, subok na sa balita. DZRH, haligi ng katotohanan. DZRH, makabagong bayanihan. Serbisyong tapat sa iyo. DZRH.
Proud member ng KBP, kapisanan ng mga broadcaster ng Pilipinas.
Isang mapayapang hapon Pilipinas. Ito po ang inyong balerina ng bayan, Lisa Macuja, na bumabati sa lahat ng nakikinig sa atin sa DZRH at sa nanonood sa RHTV, lalo na sa mga kasamahan nating alagad ng sining at kultura sa buong bansa. Sa hapong ito, makakasama natin ang isang tanyag na manunulat na napakarami ng naiambag sa pagsulong ng ating bayan bilang isang batikan at multi-awarded literary journalist and book author. Kaya't huwag kayong aalis, samahan ninyo kami sa kalahating oras ng masayang kwentuhan kasama ang premyadong writer and journalist na si Criselda Yabes.
Si Criselda Yabes ay isa sa mga manunulat na tumanggap ng 2017 Gawad Francisco Balagtas para sa kategoryang Essay and Fiction in English mula sa Unyon ng mga Manunulat sa Pilipinas nitong nakaraang National Writers Congress. Nagtapos siya ng kursong journalism mula sa UP Diliman noong 1985 kung saan naging pangulo siya ng UP Journalism Club. Nagsimula siya bilang reporter para sa mga international agencies tulad ng Associated Press at Reuters at di naglaon ay correspondent para sa Newsweek at Washington Post kung saan nag-cover siya ng mga digmaan, kudeta at armadong rebelyon. Hindi lamang sa Pilipinas kundi pati na rin sa iba't ibang dako ng Asia at Middle East. Nang pumasok ang dekada 90, naging freelance journalist siya para sa iba't ibang periodiko at magazine habang abala rin sa pagsusulat ng libro at pagtuturo. Bilang autor, nakapag-akda siya ng 8 aklat na karamihan ay tungkol sa military at armed conflict sa Mindanao. Kabilang dito ang Serena Story, The Loss of a Kingdom na tumanggap ng 2010 UP Centennial Literary Prize for Creative Nonfiction. Peace Warriors on the Trail with Filipino Soldiers na tumanggap ng 2012 National Book Award for Creative Nonfiction at ang Below the Crying Mountain na nabilang sa long list ng prestigyosong Man Asian Literary Prize noong 2010 at nawagi ng Gawad Likhaan UP Centennial Literary Prize noong 2008. Tumanggap din siya ng International Journalism Fellowships tulad ng 2016 Asia Leadership Fellowship sa Japan at ang Diana Bennett Fellowship para sa Black Mountain Institute for Writers sa Estados Unidos. Isang mainit na pagbati ang hatid ng ART2ART sa multi-awarded Filipino writer at journalist na si Griselda Yabes.
Magandang hapon, Chris, and welcome to Art2Art.
Magandang hapon rin sa'yo, Lisa.
Okay,
Salamat,
Chris,
Lisa.
well, of course, una sa lahat, congratulations.
Salamat.
You won the 2017 Gawad Francisco Balagtas
One of the winners, yes.
award
yes.
mula sa Umpil.
Yes.
The,
Writers Union ng
in the
Philippines.
National Writers Congress last April.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, thank you.
What's the significance for you? Ang significance?
Kasi nung pinili, nagulat rin ako dahil matagal na lang sinasabi sa akin yon, pero iniisip ko baka kailangan ko pa magsulat ulit ng libro. Pero apparently, parang na-accumulate nila yung works ko, yung essays na nasulat ko. Kasi yung award specifically sa essay tsaka fiction writing. So parang minerge yung nagawa ko both as a journalist and as a writer. So sa akin yun, significant yun. Na pwede kong sabihin, journalist rin ako at writer rin ako. Yun.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
And in the very beginning, kumbaga mula
umpisa.
sa pagkabata,
Yeah.
talaga bang mahilig ka na sa pagsusulat or kailan mo natuklasan na ito ay isang interest na nais mong, dalhin habang buhay?
yeah. Actually, naisip ko, siguro habang kasi yung lolo ko, writer siya, professor. Tapos sa bahay niya, ang daming magazines tsaka libro. Yung libro parang off-limits ng konti. Pero yung magazines, nandun na lahat nakatambak. So, nagbabasa ako. Tapos parang gusto ko lang, sa akin lang, sinasabi ko lang, one day gusto ko rin magsulat ng mga storya. And eventually, nangyari rin yun. Kasi pumunta ako sa UP, I took up journalism. And it was the best time for a journalist nung pag-graduate ko kasi yun yung time ng EDSA. So, nakita ko yung dulong-dulo ng dictatorship, tapos nakita ko yung umpisa ng demokrasya. So, for you to be a journalist in that transition,
Yes,
it's
that's right.
really something,
That's
you
right.
know? No, I don't think I will ever forget that. I don't think I'll never give it up.
I don't think anyone who
would-
lived through that time will
Yes.
forget it. No?
Or we can't let anyone take that away from
Yes,
us, right? Because
that's true.
now, 30 years later, people are saying, oh, it was like this, it was like that, it didn't really happen, it was an elitist thing, but we should never, ever let anyone take that part of history away from us.
That is true.
Yeah.
That is true.
Yeah.
Pero balita ko na you spent some time of your adolescent years in Zamboanga.
Yes, I did. Kasi yung tatay ko, nagtatrabaho siya sa bangko noon. So, nagbubukas pa lang sila ng bangko. Una siyang inassign actually sa Saholo. So, yun naging memorable rin sa akin yun, which also explains...
So tumira ka din sa Holo?
Tumira ako
Wow,
sa Holo
okay.
rin. Tapos, nilipat kami sa Zamboanga just before the uprising ng Holo, 1974. So, in a way, yun, nagkaroon rin ng impact sa akin because later on as a journalist, I would cover conflict areas. Parang I would get my high and I wouldn't feel afraid. Parang I knew exactly what to do in a danger zone. So, yun yung yun yung I think reason kung bakit, I mean, living in Holo and then Zamboanga, kung bakit as a journalist, mas attracted ako sa gulo at that time.
Sa gulo?
I mean, gulo in the sense na, nangyari nung EDSA revolution, di ba? Tapos biglang madaming coup attempts. You know, for the first, we had 7, 8, 9 coup attempts. Well,
That's
some
true.
people would say 8, some people would say 9, but I just basically counted 7 that were significant. So yun, because of that, na nagkaroon ng impact sa akin yung nangyari sa Zamboanga. Kasi lumalaki ako na ganito yung pagkalaki ko. Parang, sige, one Sunday, tara, manood tayo ng sine. Hindi, baka magkaroon ng bomba. I mean, somebody might... Kasi at that time, uso yung throwing grenades in movie houses.
Yes.
You know, and we didn't even know what was happening. We didn't understand the Muslim rebellion at that time. It wasn't taught to us in school. And I resented that, you know, when I grew up. So it was just... Siguro after university years na lang and as a journalist na sinabi ko sa sarili ko, babalik ako, gusto kong malaman kung ano talaga nangyari sa sulok. Diba?
Siguro sinabi mo sa sarili mo, isusulat ko kung anong nangyari talaga.
Yes.
Okay. So, which of those assignments para sa'yo ang pinaka-memorable?
Well, kasi yung co-attempts talagang I was living through it. I was witnessing history, right? You know, as it was happening. So, yung first book ko was about that. Yung co-attempts, kung sino yung mga officers na involved. Kasi at that time, nung panahon ni Marcos, yung military, closed world eh. Parang hindi ka talaga makapasok sa kampo, hindi mo bigla pwede lang interviewin yung mga officers. Tapos, nung pagkatapos nung after EDSA, eto na, you know, pwede mo na silang kausapin, pwede ka nang pumasok sa kampo, gusto mo na talaga mangyari kung ano talaga yung close world na yon. So, yun yung more or less una kong naging libro. Narrate ko yung nangyari sa mga coup attempts. Kung sino yung mga officers, yung good guys, bad guys, sino yung pro, sino yung anti, tsaka kung bakit ganun yung kultura nila.
This was a journey of scars?
No, this was The Boys from the Barracks.
Oh, The Boys from the Barracks.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. It was The Boys from
That
the
was your
Barracks.
first book?
The very first book.
I see.
And it was a labor of love kasi nung sinulat ko yon, hindi ko pa naiisip kung meron akong publisher o hindi. I just had my own time. Ginawa ko lang yung gusto kong gawin. Hindi ko naiisip yung outcome. Basta sinulat ko lang siya.
Okay. In between your journalist assignments.
Yes. Kasi at that time, journalist ako. I was working for major news organizations. I was working for Associated Press, and then I moved to Reuters, and then I went freelance and did work for major foreign news organizations like Newsweek, Washington Post. So yung lahat nung kinover ko, I was keeping my notebooks. You know, tsaka yung mga interviews ko outside of work. You know, yung when you're having coffee with them, you know, yeah.
Naturally, that would evolve into a book.
Yes, yeah. So ang feeling ko noon parang if I didn't write a book, it would have been a waste, right? I would not have been able to forgive myself. Yeah.
Okay. So, A Journey of Scars was your second book?
Yes, yes. It was a more painful period.
Okay, take us through that.
The
Because
pain?
you described A Journey of Scars as your personal reflection on love and life.
Yeah.
Noong nanirahan ka sa Europe.
Yes.
So, wow.
Yeah.
Parang,
Yun yung madugo.
Naging interesting yung pagtira mo sa Europe.
mas madugo yung parte yun. Kasi anong nangyari after The Boys from the Barracks? So basically tapos na yung mga coup attempts. Nag-apply ako sa isang fellowship sa Europe na yung fellowship na to every 2 or 3 months, 1 year ka titira sa Paris. And
I wouldn't mind that at all.
Yeah.
Wow.
Tapos 35 kaming mga journalists from all over the world. So yung exposure mo talagang lumawak, di ba? Tapos every 2 or 3 months, pwede kang pumunta sa isang European country para mag-report doon kung anong gusto mong gawin, anong issue or subject ang gusto mong gawin. At that time, katatapos lang ng communism. So bukas yung Eastern European countries, you know, Czechoslovakia, Albania, Hungary, you know, all these places in the East, Central and Eastern part of Europe.
That's true.
Yeah. So I chose those. And also, a war was breaking out in Yugoslavia, the ethnic cleansing. And I focused on that. Diba, sabi ko sa'yo kanina, di ba yung gera?
Gusto mo talaga yung magulo. Oo.
So doon ako pumunta agad, yung gulo sa sa Bosnia, sa Zagreb, sa Croatia, nakapunta ako doon. Tapos nakahanap ako ng love story doon. Pero at the same time, I was also going through my internal turmoil because I had broken up with my partner. And so while I was traveling different parts of Europe, I was grieving or, you know, trying to heal or trying to get over a heartache. So parang nag-mix lahat yung mga the internal and the external. Kaya ako nasulat yung Journey of Scars. Yeah.
And you have it here?
Yes, I do.
In the studio?
Yes.
And
it's
I
out.
heard that you wouldn't mind reading a little bit of from your book.
Okay, sige. Okay, brief explanation lang.
Okay.
Itong libro kasi out of print na to. Pero susubukan ko i-book ulit. napatranscribe ko na and everything. Etong libro kasi, one of the things na ginawa ko dito is to meet my favorite writers. One of my favorite writers. He's a Polish writer who has passed away. He passed away in 2007. Ang pangalan niya, Ryszard Kapuscinski. And he did the same thing. He covered all the conflict areas. For Polish news agency, he went to Africa, Latin America. He wrote books about Haile Selassie and the Shah of Iran. And he wrote it in a different genre. Hindi lang siya yung straight journalism. Nilagay rin niya yung kanyang ideas kung ano nakikita niya kahit na kung naglalakad lang siya sa kalye o nakaupo lang siya sa isang cafe, sinusulat niya yung mga observations niya. Tapos, syempre parang nandun rin yung creative imagination niya, no? Pag may nagkukwento sa kanya tungkol sa kay Haile Selassie or sa Shah of Iran, pag meron siyang source na kausap, nilalagay rin niya yung imagination niya kung anong klaseng leader yon, paano sila namumuhay sa kanilang palasyo. So, isang parte nitong libro, yung pagka-meet ko sa kanya, at in-associate ko siya sa lolo ko na madami ring libro na writer rin. Kasi parang iniisip ko, bakit yung lolo ko hindi ako binigyan ng libro or hindi siya nagbasa sa akin or hindi kami masyadong nag-usap, masyadong closed yung world niya, yung sa kanya lang, tsaka yung sa academe lang siya. Tapos itong si Ryszard Kapuscinski, no, na-meet ko siya sa Warsaw, open na open siya, you know, nandun yung libro niya was everywhere. He was showing me his books, he took me around town, you know, he was discussing history and everything. So parang, like I said, this was a mixture of, you know, you were going through a lot of pain and all these things were coming out of you.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yun. So parang, iniisip ko yung childhood ko with yung sa lolo ko. Tapos, hindi kami close ng lolo ko. Hindi ko actually masyadong kilala yung lolo ko. Tapos, at the same time, nandito si Ryszard Kapuscinski na favorite writer ko. Na napaka-accessible. So, nag-shopping pa kami, nilakad niya ako. Tapos, for a while, we were corresponding with each other. So, I think, yun, yung part na sa libro was yung shock ko na makita yung mga libro. And,
Okay.
Conversations with him.
Okay.
Yun. Did you want me to read it?
Yes, I'm sure
okay.
our listeners are excited to.
It's a very, very small part of the book. So, anyway, the title of this chapter is When Books Hit the Ceiling. So, yeah. Okay, so let me just read a few parts. So I was 4 or 5 years old when my parents left me in the care of my grandparents. My grandmother took me to nursery school. She's now an invalid, a survivor of a brain operation, spending the rest of her life in her antique 4-poster bed. Where my grandmother was prone to over-talking, my grandfather was spare with words. He was a university professor, a writer, a historian. He was nothing of the sort that reminded me of intellectuals. He walked very slowly, as if chains were tied to his ankles. His square jaw of a face seemed perpetually fixed. I hardly saw him smile. Seated at the head of the dining table, the rest of us silenced by his presence, he had a strange way of starting his meals. From the corner of my eyes, I watched him scoop with a serving spoon from a bowl of soup, and then pour the soup from the serving spoon into another smaller spoon and sip from it without making any noise. I could not see why the world came to a halt because of his presence. To me, he looked more like a loner, unmindful of mundane household matters, of his wife, of his own children, of all of us. It was as if we were all an accident in his life. The home of my grandparents at the backyard of the university campus had been the living quarters of American officers after the liberation of Manila from the Japanese. My grandfather's name was on a signboard posted on the porch entrance. It disappeared when he moved to a new house. The new house, not far from the university, had marbled floors, fancy grilled windows, glass doors, heavy drapes, modern decor, but it lacked the provincial charm of the old wooden house surrounded with santol, duhat, kaimito trees. It seemed Lolo missed the peaceful ambience of his old home. One day, The old house decayed. The porch where I once sat waiting for the ice cream man vanished. Termites ate away the walls. Slum dwellers pilfered wood planks for their shanty homes. Lolo's house collapsed, then was gone. When I went jogging one morning before going to work, it was all bushes, as if nothing ever once existed there. When I walked into the library in Warsaw, where I met Kapuscinski, I was again a little girl disobeying my grandmother's orders and turning the knob of the door of Lolo's forbidden room. And what was it I saw? Books, 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 everywhere, in all corners, on the table, on the walls, from the floor to the ceiling. It was dizzying. I stood there as if in a trance. I couldn't understand why a little girl was forbidden to enter such a room filled with books. There was no monster. Would you like something to drink? Coffee or tea? The little girl snapped out of her trance and I said, tea would be fine. I had planned and waited for this meeting for months. From Zagreb in spring, I took a direct flight to Warsaw to meet one of my favorite writers. Ryszard Kapuscinski opened the doors of his library to me. It's my working room, he said, when he saw me gaping in awe. Not so long a time, I used to live in very poor conditions, he said. When the communists declared martial law in 1981, he was thrown out of work at the Polish news agency. He joined Solidarity, which was now the political party in power. And what did I see in Kapuscinski's library? Books, 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 everywhere. That's it.
That's a writer's paradise. Books, books, everywhere.
Yes. I myself, I live in a small condominium now and I don't know where to put my books. Yeah. So most of the time, you have to, I don't know, kind of segregate them, choose which one you like and which one you don't read anymore and you give it to libraries, public libraries, or you give it to people selling books, secondhand books.
That's true.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll break for a while.
Okay. Thank you.
Marami pa po tayong pag-uusapan kasama ang premyadong manunulat na si Criselda Yabes. Dito pa rin sa Art2Art. Magbabalik po kami pagkatapos ng ilang paalala.
Programang hatid ay sining at kulturang para sa lahat. Magbabalik ang Art to Art. Usapang sining at kultura para sa lahat. Kasama ang balerina ng bayan, si Lisa Macuja. Art to Art.
Kasama pa rin natin ang literary journalist at 2017 Gawad Francisco Balagtas Awardee na si Criselda Yabes. Chris, you are a literary journalist.
Yeah.
I mean, what exactly is literary journalism?
Okay, basically, it has the same features as new journalism. Pero explain ko muna. Kasi yung journalism talaga is getting news every day, di ba? Kuha ng interview, get the facts, write them right there and then. Ang literary journalism, it gives you time to talk to people, you spend more time with them, you get more views and perspective about the story. So meron kang konting distance na hindi kagad isusulat right there and then. So parang nagsusulat ka rin ng libro. Pero you're basing it on facts from several interviews. So hindi lang yung sa isang araw, may isang tao ka lang pwedeng interviewin o dalawang tao interviewin para magsulat ng storya. O nandun ka lang sa isang press conference, kukunin mo na yung, yung details, tapos meron ka ng storya. Yung literary journalism or new journalism, mas may time ka na i-interview lahat ng mga taong involved sa storya na yon. Gaya, for example, ng Boys from the Barracks. Sa isang, kunyari yung event na sa isang coup attempt, isusulat mo lang kung ano nangyari nung isang araw na yun, di ba? 500 soldiers, mutinied, and, the government is trying to stop it right now, and they were, government forces tried to stop them in this camp. But sa literary journalism, gaya nung ginawa ko na tinago ko lahat ng mga notes ko from that day, all those events that happened. And at the same time, I was also interviewing them outside of the story, outside of that event.
I see.
To get the background, to get to know more people, what are the links, what are the connections, what are the patterns. Tapos doon na ako na nakapag-stand back and to write about it. So
Okay.
parang yon. So sa atin naman kasi, hindi kasi masyadong ginagamit ang literary journalism or new journalism kasi kukunti lang yung magazines natin na gumagawa nun. At saka hindi sila masyadong nagbabayad.
Okay. Pero as a literary journalist, ikaw ba yung pumipili ng subjects mo or ina-assign sa'yo ng editor?
Most of the time ako.
I see.
Yeah. Most of the time ako. Kasi kung i-assign sa'yo, dapat i-assume mo na meron silang budget for you to do that over a period of time. So, gaya nung sinabi ko sa Boys from the Barracks na labor of love ko, I was working as a journalist, right? I mean, I was getting paid, had my salary. So nobody said, you just do this and on your own and come up with a book at the end of 2 or 3 or 4 years, right? So ito, parang inaccumulate ko siya from the work I was doing as a journalist, but also doing things on the side. So in a way, it's a story that I chose to write about. Yeah.
Okay.
Yun. Kasi, yun nga, wala tayong mga magazines na gano'n, di ba? So most of the time, storya ko yun. And usually, ginagawa na lang libro.
Yeah.
Kasi
Well, speaking
sayang
of your book, yung isang libro mo ay Below the Crying Mountain, which was in the long list of the highly prestigious Man Asia Literary Prize noong 2010.
Yes.
Mga love stories,
Na
love
naman.
stories na naman, na naganap noong 1970s, nung nagsimula ang kaguluhan ng sa Mindanao.
Right.
So,
Paano nangyari yun?
yeah, paano nangyari ito? Paano mo na-research ang mga materials para dito?
Okay, may evolution rin yan. Di ba, a while ago we were talking about a journey of scars. Nasa Europe ako. Nung nasa Europe ako, I became conscious of how people there were so proud of their history. They knew their history. I didn't. So, syempre alam natin yung basics, yung nakuha natin, what we studied in school, but sila talagang, it's in their soul, history is in their soul. They're driven by history. The decisions they make in their lives are based on history. So, nung pagbalik ko, sabi ko, ano yung history ko? Ano yung history na alam ko? So, bumalik ako sa childhood ko, sa Zamboanga. At doon ko hinuka yung ano talaga nangyari sa Muslim Rebellion. Doon ako nagbasa ulit at doon rin ako nagalit dahil iniisip ko, teka sandali, nag-aaral ako sa isang magaling na school sa Zamboanga. Bakit hindi man lang nila tinuturo sa amin ito? Kasi nga, may division yung Christians at Muslims. So sa kanila, nasa Zamboanga City kami, so sa tip ng peninsula yon, tapos nandito na yung Sulusi. So sa kanila, may parang invisible frontier yan. Those are the Muslims and we're the Christians. They're the bad guys, we're the good guys, right? We're the decent people, they're the bad people. So ako nagalit ako dahil na-realize ko na yung history ng Sulu was part of ours, part of our history. Doon nag-umpisa ang Pilipinas bago naging Pilipinas, yung Sultanate. So nag-research ako doon. Doon ako nahirapan dahil hindi na ako journalist noon na araw-araw meron akong trabaho. Tumira na rin ako ulit sa Paris, bumalik ako sa Paris. So tuwing babalik ako sa Manila, talagang pupunta ako sa Sulu, magre-research ako ulit. Tapos, yun, nagstay ako sa Hulo ulit at dun ko ginawang parang backdrop yung history sa isang love story, well, dalawang love story actually, between a soldier and because during the uprising, parang naging military rin yung Holo. I mean, nagkaroon ng martial law yung Holo at that time. Between a soldier and a Muslim girl, and a Muslim professor and Koleyala, a mestiza from Zamboanga. So, in-intertwine ko yung love stories nila na yung backdrop ng storya is yung rebellion noong 1974 sa Holo.
Wow. Okay.
So, parang, di ba? I mean, coup attempts, and you go to Europe, and you see the war, and the love stories that I saw in Yugoslavia. Tapos, you go home, and you want to have the same sense of history as what you saw in
Yeah.
Europe, and you go back to the core, diba? The very parang going back to your womb in a way, you know.
And how long normally does it take you to complete a book, a project?
It's quite long because Below the Crying Mountain turned out to be a novel. Initially, I was thinking of doing literary journalism. You know, I was going to interview people, but while I was talking to people, they were talking about their love stories. You know, in Holo, they were talking about their love stories. So I go, why don't I just combine them? You know, the stories I know, their stories, and turn it into fiction. And so it came out to be fiction. How long did it take? This one was quite long. Kasi nga, tumira na ako sa Paris noon. Nabitin ako, hindi ko pa natatapos yung research ko sa Pilipinas. So tuwing magbabakasyon ako once a year, pupunta ako doon. So on and off. Tapos nung nasulat ko rin yung libro, na-reject lahat ng mga publishers na binigay ko. So parang sinet aside ko rin. Tapos I decided to come home na. And when I came home, I just did the rewrite. And I said, okay, tapos na ako. And that's when I entered it in a contest.
Okay.
And that's how it won. So meron siyang sariling process.
Yeah.
Writing fiction has its own process.
Yeah, that's true.
Hindi gaya ng journalism.
You said you decided to come home after living in Europe, I mean, in and out for quite a while. I mean, what made you decide to come home? Because usually yung mga Filipinos na babase overseas, hindi na sila bumabalik.
Well, again, personal ulit kasi number one, nagkasakit ako, and number two, my marriage wasn't working. And I think it comes to that point in your life when you say, what do you really want to do? You know, what is it that makes you happy? And I think I just wanted to go back to myself, you know, find myself. And so I went home. So it's like starting from scratch again, you know. I'd lost my contacts as a journalist and I had to start again as a journalist. And ironically, my first assignment was to go back to Sulu.
Back to your roots.
Back to my roots. So, di ba? Everything has its way of doing things. You know, parang they just fall into place if you're patient enough, right? And not forcing the issue. Yun. Yeah. So.
But it sounds like you're doing research all the time.
Yeah, actually, that's how it feels like.
So
You know,
yeah, how do you unwind? Do you have interests outside of writing?
Actually, I do. Recently, the last few years, I started bird watching.
Okay.
Because it gives me peace. You know, that's like, it's like meditating. So I end up doing things like that quiets me down, you know, being closer to nature. I like hiking. I used to love scuba diving. And some people think of it as a sport, but really when you go down underwater, it's meditation.
Yeah, it is. You're transported to another world.
Yeah.
And you're just alone with the fish and your thoughts.
Yes, exactly.
And you can hear your breathing
Exactly.
with the bubbles.
Oo, di ba? Kasi you have to be conscious of your breathing eh. May tangke ka, hindi mo pwedeng ubusin kagad yung air mo. So dapat slow lang yung breathing mo, naririnig mo yung breathing mo, di ba? And to me, our underwater life is my equivalent of a museum. You know, I mean, I travel in Europe and you see all the wonderful museums around, you see their history, and tayo konti lang yung museums natin. So sa akin, ang museum natin is underwater. You know, that's where life
That's
is.
a lovely way of looking at it.
It becomes an underwater. It becomes a museum to me. Kaya pag baba ko, sabihin ko, ito parang Louvre. Kasi iba-iba yung ganito. Ito parang iba yung parang Jardin de Luxembourg. You know? But I associate things like that with what I see underwater.
And do you still travel frequently? Or
I'm usually out once a month. Yeah, I do either for work or, and I still go back to Europe. I try to go back like once a year if I can. I cannot really stop traveling in the sense, but it's also emotionally draining. Very emotionally draining.
Now, are you working on any projects at the moment? What's in store for us in the coming months?
Well, I'm finishing. Oh, this is crazy because you know, when I was talking about history, so I thought about Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao, like a theme thing. But I'm done with Mindanao. So I'm finishing something that's related to the Visayas.
Okay.
Yeah, and again, the backdrop of that is Yolanda.
Okay.
So kailangan, yun, again, proseso na naman. Nung natapos ko, kala ko, ito na, okay na to, tapos na.
So may love story sa Yolanda.
Yeah. Meron rin. Oo. Yeah. At saka napapansin ko, laging may dalawang babae.
Oo, okay.
Ganon.
Aabangan natin yan.
Oh, sige.
Okay.
Sana matapos ko.
Chris, maraming salamat sa pagdalo mo dito sa aming programa.
Salamat rin. Yeah, it was
And
a
of
good
course, you know, sana magpatuloy ang iyong tagumpay bilang alagad ng sining at panitikan.
Maraming salamat.
Hanggang sa susunod na linggo, samahan ninyo kami ulit dito sa Art to Art, kung saan ang usapang sining at kultura ay para sa lahat. Ito po ang inyong balerina ng bayan, Lisa Macuja, nagpupugay sa artistang Pilipino.
Makabagong bayanihan, serbisyong tapat sa iyo, DZRH.
Sa mga matitinding mansyang hinaharap mo, Champion Supra Power ang katapat mo. Madaling tinatanggal ang matitinding mansya tulad ng putik, dugo at chocolate. Para sa puting walang bakas. Talagang supra sa tanggalan ng mansya. Champion Supra Power.
Boom, papaya, white rose papaya, yeah, 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 yeah. Boom, puti ka in 7 days, oh yeah, 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 yeah. White rose papaya.
White Rose Papaya na may double whitening, papaya extracts plus whitening ng vitamin B3. Clinically proven magpaputi in as early as 7 days.
Boom, puti ka, white rose papaya.
Papaya puti, papaya fast. White Rose Papaya.
Sa hugasin, ano nga ba ang magaling?
Maraming nahuhugasan ito. Hindi papatalo ang Smart ko.
Sa kalinisan ng hugasin, makikita ang galing. Ang Smart may over 80% more cleaning power kaysa leading liquid brand. May double tanggaling formula. Tanggal galing ang sebo, tanggal galing ang bakterya. Sa presyong abot kaya. Kaya lipat na sa number 1, Smart Dishwashing Paste. Tanggaling galing. Also available, Smart Dishwashing Liquid.
ACS.
Ratsyada sa gabi, pero go pa rin sa umaga. Sa galing mo, Champion Supra Power ang katapat mo. Madaling tinatanggal ang matitinding mansya tulad ng putik. Para sa puting walang bakas. Para sa mga supra nanay, Champion Supra Power.
Tips! Ang eskwela sa radyo na magbibigay ng kapangyarihan sa mamamayan na maging henyo sa panunuri sa mga bagay ukol sa pag-unlad ng karunungan at kaalaman. Ito ang Radyo Henyo, kasama ang champion na tagapagsulong ng science and technology sa bansa, si Angelo Palmones. At lalong sasaya ang makabuluhang talakayan sa kanyang katandem na si Ruby Cristobal, na isang certified SNT practitioner diva. Radyo Henyo sa DZRH.
Narito na Radyo Henyo! Bagong kaalaman hatid nito sa science at technology. Pag-aralan, tuklasin at matuto. Radyo Henyo! Yan, eskwela sa radyo. Umamon sa pag-unlad ng karunungan. Sa daigdig man at kalawakan, maging henyo sa Radyo Henyo! Narito na Radyo Henyo! Bagong kaalaman makabago sa science at technology. Pag-aralan, tuklasin at matuto sa Radyo Henyo!
Magandang hapon, Luzon, Visayas at Mindanao. Kayo po'y nakikinig ulit ng Radyo Henyo dito sa DCRH at sa ngalan ni Kuya Angelo Palmones. Ako po ang inyong makakasama ngayong hapon. Ako po si Christian Manyo at syempre, ang ganda-ganda ni Mr. Rovi. Doc Rovi, good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon, Christian. Thank you At nandyan ka lagi para sa amin. At syempre, ngayong hapon, ang ganda-ganda ng ating topic, Christian. Mag-e-enjoy ka dito, I'm sure.
Oo, pero bago yan Doc Ruby, balita lang natin yung galing sa DOH dahil ngayong hapon, umabot na sa 561,169 ang kaso ng COVID-19 sa Pilipinas. Makaraan itong madagdagan ng 1,888 sa magdamaga at 26,238 dito ang active cases, habang nadagdagan naman ng 9,737 ang bilang ng gumaling na nagdala sa kabuuang bilang na 522,843 at 20 naman ang nadagdag sa bilang ng mga binawian ng buhay at nagdala naman sa kabuuang bilang na 12,088 deaths ang dahil sa COVID-19, Doc Ruby.
Nako, tago-tago pa rin tayo, Christian. Ingat pa rin mga kahenyo dahil nandyan pa rin ang peligro. At yun na nga, di ba, may mga variants pa, may mga mutation pa na nagaganap.
At kanina nga, Doc Ruby, nanunsyo ng DOH na may 18 kaso ng B.1.1.7 o UK variant ng COVID-19 na naitala sa Pilipinas na nagdala naman sa kabuuang bilang na 62 UK variant cases dito sa ating bansa. At yung tatlo dyan, meron daw nung mutation, Doc Ruby, na nakita dyan sa Central Visayas.
Oo, nag-a-adjust kasi yan, nag-a-adapt yung mga yan. Depende doon sa kondisyon ng tao at ng lugar kung nasaan yung mismong infection. So, ingat-ingat.
At ang virus pala, talaga naman palang tuloy-tuloy ang mutation, Doc Ruby. Ngayon ko lang naiintindihan.
Yes.
Nung nagko-cover tayo ng DOH.
Hanggat hindi mo yan, hindi humihinto ang infection, hanggat hindi yan nauubos, natural na na tendency na siya ay mag-mutate ng tuloy-tuloy. That's the natural tendency of all virus. And even bacteria, di ba? Nag-mutate din naman ang bacteria. Pero mas mabilis yata mag-mutate ang virus.
Alright.
Isip nila ay malikot, tanong dito ay kailangan masagot sila, ang mga batang genius.